All right, as we stated in the previous video, the Bible is the Christian's charter. So we want to be very, very clear to separate what man's governments have. They have their own separate charter. So when you enter into that sandbox of that charter, man's charters, you become under the obligation of it because you're acting within it and, shall we say the word, IDing yourself, identifying yourself within it. So anything that it does or anything that it legislates or anything that it actually puts down and says that they are going to enforce as law, you are going to be subject to. Very simple. If I'm under a charter of another nation, well then I'm not subject to the charter of the other nation, unless the two have commingled together to agree to each other's policies. In the sense of God, God does not agree with man. He allows him to exist with his governments, but his rules are in here. So do not confuse mixing the two together and then claiming to be a secular citizen of one of the charters of man and then call out for help from God when it doesn't go well or you feel you're inconvenienced. The two do not mix. They're oil and water. So do not mix the two. So that's what we're going to talk about, the Canadian charter. And I'm only talking to you from a standpoint of someone being outside of it as a non-Canadian. I'm not a legal participant, and I'm only talking to you from my view looking in that sandbox. So according to the Constitution Act 1982, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Part 1, starts off with, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Very simply, they're saying that their charter would recognize those that are under this charter, but they did not say that they basically are under this charter. They're just saying that they would recognize it, and so it's up to you to comprehend that. Now, the next line says the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in its subject only. Well, there's the word, remember, only. Now there's a limitation coming. This is not absolute anymore. Only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So this has got nothing to do with theocracy, and they just said that they can limit that within what they declare to be reasonable bounds and limits. So there are many things that will occur under the governments and charters of man that would absolutely violate the charter of this book, the Bible. You absolutely are violating every one of the 10 commandments as a democratic or a participant as a legal citizen by consent in any one of the various governments of man. Just remember that. You violate every one of those 10 commandments by stating the fact that you're a Canadian or an American or any of those countries.